Gifty is a young woman working on her PhD at Stanford University, and she's using mice to try and unlock parts of the brain that are responsible for addiction. If she can just find out what makes the mice keep coming back for more, then maybe she can understand the disease that took her brother's life. That's part of the backstory of Transcendent Kingdom. This is the latest literary offering from Yaa Gyasi. It is a stunning novel to get lost in, one that looks at the tension and the harmony between science and religion and the deep shame surrounding addiction. And one Ghanaian family's experience in America. Yaa Gyasi is joining us this morning from Brooklyn. Good morning to you.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
You know, the subject of this book is very timely here in Canada. We are dealing with an opioid crisis right now in parallel with the pandemic. This story all starts with a visit to a lab that your friend was working in. So tell us about the genesis of this project for you.
Sure. So my best friend from Alabama, where I grew up, was getting her PhD in neuroscience at Stanford University. This was around 2016 when I had finished my first novel. And I was really curious about her work. I wanted to know more about what she did. So I just asked if I could go shadow her in her lab. She very kindly said yes. And I went. I watched her perform surgery on her mice. I saw her kind of light up as she talked about her work, and that started the wheels turning for me. I wondered if I could use this research in my own work.
So your main character is a young woman named Gifty. She was born in Ghana. She's living in the U.S. Can you tell us a little bit about her and what drives her? We mentioned some of it in the introduction.
Yeah, so Gifty studies something called the neural circuitry of reward seeking, which, if you don't know what that means, don't worry. Basically, she studies addiction and depression. And it's at a time in her life when her own mother, who suffers from depression, comes to stay with her. So Gifty is a character who's taking care of her mother, working toward her final thesis, and reflecting on her childhood, particularly the years that led up to her beloved older brother's death from a heroin overdose. So she's a character who is incredibly brilliant, incredibly curious, but also really guarded and reticent. She has these painful memories that she's trying to kind of build a wall around.
Running alongside the science in this book, which is the foundation, is the issues of religion and faith. And for Gifty, science and religion coexist quite naturally, but that's something her colleagues have real trouble understanding. So how does she square that away?
Yeah, I think of Gifty as a character who wants to kind of reject these binaries, reject the idea of these two things existing in opposition to one another. She grew up religious. She was raised Pentecostal, and her mother is still really devout. And it's one of the ways that she communicates with her mother is through this language of her faith. And so even as she starts to kind of leave that faith behind, I think for her, it's something that she can't completely discard because it means so much to her family, and it has pulled her mother through so many difficult times. So I think of her as a character who really tries to honor that religion that she grew up in, even as she turns towards science and kind of leaves some of the tenets of the religion behind.
Gifty's dealing with deep shame about her brother's opioid addiction and death. She and her mom deal with that shame in very different ways. And at one point, Gifty realizes it's easier to write all addicts off as being bad and weak-willed people than it is to actually look closely at the nature of their suffering. So I'm curious what you learned about addiction over the course of researching your book.
I learned so much about addiction. You know, as you said, for Canada, we here in the States are also experiencing this opioid epidemic that is running parallel to the pandemic and has been for many years. And as I was researching this novel, I think one thing that became abundantly clear to me is that we are talking about a disease, something that affects this organ in your body, the brain. And it's not just a simple answer of, you know, having more willpower, just kind of gathering yourself together to fight against it, that you need more help. And we have to start thinking about addiction as a healthcare crisis, as an issue that requires medical attention, and start looking for solutions in that regard.
Our health minister was on the program this morning talking about the very same thing. Hey, I can't let you go without asking you about Levar Burton. Some writers come to the craft later and I love this story. You were 7, you submit a story to Reading Rainbow. What happened?
Yes, I was a devout follower of Reading Rainbow.
I loved that show.
I loved it so much. I watched it every day. And one year when I was 7, I saw a call for the Young Writers and Illustrators competition. So I asked my dad if I could enter. He pulled out the typewriter. I started writing this story called Just Me and My Dog about a little girl who wants a dog. It was thinly veiled autobiography. And I sent it in, and I didn't win, but I did get honorable mention. Levar Burton signed my certificate and sent it back. Yeah, and it's still one of my most prized possessions.
I'm a little jealous of that story. I love that show. Take a look. It's in a book. The Reading Rainbow.
The Reading Rainbow.
The book now, not the Reading Rainbow one, is called Transcendent Kingdom. It's a fascinating story. So great to meet you. Thanks for coming on this morning.
Thank you again. I appreciate it.
Thanks for watching. If you like this, be sure to subscribe here.
And you can check out more Your Morning videos right here.